Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second session of our captivating series on challenges of negative emotions in mental health in today's world. Thank you for joining us again as we dive deeper into the complexities of our emotional landscape in the modern world. In our first session, we laid the foundation, and now it's time to explore further, to confront, and ultimately conquer the emotional challenges that we face daily. For this session, we have a dynamic speakers along with our chairperson, Dr. Hani Oberoi ji, Director of Center for Psychotherapy and Clinical Research, Professor, School of Human Studies, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. Ms. Suma Baskar ji, Department of Neurophysiology, Center for Consciousness Studies, National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, Bangalore. Venerable Lord Sangbala, Monastic Coordinator of Science for Monks Program and Emory Tibetan Science Initiative. Dr. Sabin Rizviji, Project Director, Renuma, Associate Professor, Department of Psychology, Gargi College, Delhi University, and Mr. Vinod R.G., Assistant Professor, School of Human Studies, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. Now, I would like to welcome them on the dais. Our chairperson, Dr. Hani Oberoi ji, Ms. Suma Baskar ji, Venerable Lord Sangbala, Dr. Sabin Rizvi ji, and Mr. Vinod R.G. Welcome all the speakers and our honorable chairperson. Thank you. Now, please allow me to briefly introduce our chairperson, Dr. Hani Oberoi ji. Dr. Hani Oberoi teaches at the School of Human Studies at Ambedkar University, Delhi. She is a psychoanalyst and a clinical psychologist. A search for vision of engaged spirituality and non-violent movements has held her abiding interest. As a psychotherapist, she is the eyes of the Mother of God, brings out a desperate hunger for being seen and accepted. The situation in different groups, societies, the world in whole, as well as our relation to the nature around and inside us, is making the things even more complicated. As never before, there is a necessity to become more conscious, more whole, and to follow one's process of individually, as C.G. Jung and Jungian psychologists are emphasizing so many times in order to come closer to ourselves as we really are. To know oneself through psychotherapy is one of the ways to get in contact with the whole spectrum of different methods and ways of expression could be very helpful for people facing various difficult feelings, internal and external experiences that are causing the suffering. The author is presenting her own perspective as a Jungian analyst interwoven with her long clinical practice. May now I request Dr. Oberoi to lead the session. Thank you.
I'm truly grateful to be called to this gathering. My special thanks to Geshe Damdul, to Tibet House, which I believe is my own house. Yeah, and when recently we had invited His Holiness a couple of years back to our university for the, for one of the ceremonies, and he asked me, "Where are you from?" While he said, "I am half from Tibet and I am half from India." I said, "I'm half from India and half from Tibet." Well, most of my adult life has been spent in associating, working, understanding the Tibetan movement. And I think today's session is a very important session on what are the negative emotions in the world today and what are the challenges that they bring up. Uh, Before I go on to introduce the speakers, I'll just take 2 to 3 minutes. Um, as a student of Buddhism, also of psychoanalysis and clinical psychology, I believe that there are no emotions which are negative or positive. Emotions are emotions, they arise, and if we can bear with them, there is a cessation of those emotions. That is what Buddhist meditation teaches us. That is what our work as clinicians and psychoanalysts or clinical psychologists also teaches us, that much of the work of psychotherapy is not about eradicating symptoms but coming to a tolerance of life suffering. Problems don't go away, we learn to live with them differently. We learn to bear witness to our own suffering and the sufferings of others. The problem becomes when we don't know how to coexist with pain and we disregard suffering. And I think that is the problem of negative emotions. When somebody gets stuck with their emotions, with their past, and cannot rechannelize them or transform them, then something which was an experience becomes a fractured state of being. The problem of the modern world also is a problem not just of individuals, also of communities and cultures, that we don't want to bypass othering. We deny our own pain, we dissociate our pain, we split our pain, we repress our pain and suffering, and we project it onto others. So there's a constant search for an enemy outside, you know. Because we can't bear witness to our own selves, negative emotions become into fractured histories. Our own country is going through a turbulent place. And here I would just like to take a moment. I have studied Tibet. I have also studied His Holiness the Dalai Lama for something like 20 to 25 years now. And one of the most remarkable things that I have found in the Tibetan community is the transmutation of hatred. Yeah, it is not as if Tibetans did not suffer. It is not as if they did not have anger in their hearts. But I think constantly His Holiness reminded his people that hate does not have to be denied. You cannot forgive the other by forgetting. You can only forgive someone if you can remember what has happened to you. Non remembrance is often the cause of something to become frozen. And, you know, it's a sad tragedy in our own country with the India Pakistan situation. People who coexisted with each other cannot tolerate one another today. Governments cannot tolerate one another. And those are the negative emotions we are really dealing with. You know, if only along with the celebration of independence, we could have also had a history of partition. We could have also remembered all we lost at that time. I think perhaps our future would have been different. Tibet is an exemplar in that situation, I would think. The Tibetan movement is something that we really need to take seriously and learn from, because I truly believe that if nonviolence is lost in Tibet, it would be lost in the world at large. 4 generations of people have existed in exile or back at home, and they have not succumbed to hatred. How is this happening? They are homeless, but they have a home which is much more rooted internally speaking. So, these are some of my opening remarks I wanted to make, and I hope that this will be a very meaningful session for all of us. We have 4 distinguished speakers for today, and I will introduce the first speaker, um, Dr. Miss Suma Bhaskar is currently pursuing PhD in neurophysiology at the Center for Consciousness Studies, Department of Neurophysiology, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. She has completed her MPhil neurophysiology from the same institute, and she has more than 20 years of teaching experience in medical physiology at various medical and dental colleges of Karnataka. Her research interests include neurophysiological mechanisms of adolescent depression in the years of working memory, attention, emotion, perception, yoga, counseling for adolescent depression. I request all the speakers to please maintain time. We have 4 speakers and we would like to listen to each one of you so that the last one also gets equal amount of time. My request is that kindly try to end your thoughts between 17 to 19 minutes. We will not go beyond that. Thank you very much. Ms. Suma Bhaskar.
I hope you're all awake and alert after this sumptuous meal. I would like to focus on the positive emotion. That's why I said alert and awake. Uh, I would like to begin with a thank you note to the organizers and my department as well. Yeah, we all have positive as well as negative emotions, and it is perfectly normal for us to feel happy or sad or whatever the positive or negative emotions. But the problem comes when we focus on or when we have negative emotions which become very, sorry, negative emotions which become very intense or very chronic. That is when the problem comes to our, it may be our physical health or it may be the mental well-being. So I would like to focus on a few challenges and consequences of negative emotions. The first and foremost that I would like to talk about from neuroscience perspective is on the, sorry, sorry about that. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, yeah, all right. Is on the neuroendocrine system called as the hypothalamo pituitary adrenal axis. This basically is a system which helps us deal with our daily stresses. And, and as you can see here, stress may be physiological or it may be mental stress. And it affects a particular region in the brain called as the hypothalamus, which releases a particular type of a hormone, which is called as the cortisol releasing factor, which in turn acts on another brain region called as the pituitary gland, especially the anterior pituitary, which in turn will release another hormone called as the ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone, which in turn is going to act on a particular region called as the adrenal gland, which is present on top of the kidney. And this in turn releases a hormone, which is called as the stress hormone or the cortisol, which has been in discussion so far. Apart from that, the stress also releases or also activates another system called as the sympathetic system, which is a part of our central nervous system. And that also causes a release of a hormones called as the epinephrine or norepinephrine from the same adrenal medulla. Now, both of these hormones have different types of functions which can actually help us overcome the stress normally. But if the negative emotions enhance this process, you would see that the cortisol or these adrenal hormones become increased. And this in turn can break havoc on the whole system, maybe physiological, or it may be psychological, or it may be on the brain structure itself, such as you would see that there could be a retention of sodium and water by the kidneys, which in turn can increase the blood pressure by increasing the blood volume, or it could be an increased gluconeogenesis, which basically is to increase the blood glucose levels, which in turn can lead to diabetes. Or it could be a decrease in the insulin sensitivity, which also causes the diabetes mellitus or diabetes. It can also affect the growth hormone. So there could be stunted growth, or it could affect another type of a hormone called as the thyroid hormones, which are important for, again, emotion regulations as well. Apart from that, it can break havoc on the immune system. It can weaken the immune system, or it can also bring about an increase in the inflammation. Okay, so this in turn can have a very bad effect on the emotional regulation as well. Apart from that, it could be fat mobilization, it could be protein breakdown, which can lead to physically you become weak, or it could be acting on the digestive system. You know that when you are angry, your systems don't work well, especially your digestive systems. So that could be any one of these reasons. Apart from that, you could have structural changes which can take place in the brain. Ma'am has been telling about the neuroplasticity, so it can be harmful also. The negative emotions can bring about an impact on certain regions in the brain called as the hippocampus or prefrontal cortex and amygdala. These regions are important for the emotional reactivity, or it could be the impaired executive functions. Now, what are these executive functions? It's something like your working memory is affected, or it could be the attentional control is affected. You're not able to pay attention. You can't make a proper decision, or you are not having self control, which is very important for emotion regulation. It could be you're not able to adapt to a particular situation, or it could be a impairment in the problem solving. Apart from that, in today's society, there is reduced face-to-face interaction, which we have been talking about. So this itself can lead to loneliness, and in fact, it can further enhance the social isolation. And so, especially negative emotions, I'm sorry, what happened? Okay, I'll use this. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So the negative emotions can bring about changes in these particular regions, especially the anterior cingulate cortex, which Sir was talking about, and insula. These are very important for us to be aware of the situations, especially insula is important for being aware. And anterior cingulate is the one which is important for a lot of social affect, especially you can see these regions, anterior insula or the supramarginal gyrus. I don't think I will go on explaining all this stuff, but these are the regions which are important for social effect. That is the feeling of feeling about ourselves and understanding the feeling of others. Or it may be social cognition. Social cognition meaning it could be the social stimulus perception. You see how you understand a person by looking at that person. So that is very important. These are the regions, again, important for this kind of a social cognition. Apart from that, of course, it is important for us to know about, or feel empathetic about a situation. All these systems, when they're working fine, will be good. So you could actually understand stuff. But when the negative emotions bring about changes in the circuitry, that is when you're not able to understand another one's feelings. You're not able to make out how to behave in front of others. It could be a lot of, it can lead to a vicious cycle. Apart from that, already, I think many of the speakers have spoken about the digital overload that we have from all the Facebook, Twitter, whatever, all these things. So that indulging in frequent multitasking as well as information overload, this can lead to impairment in the sustained attention. It actually bombards your attention because you're doing this, you're doing that, you're looking at that, you're seeing this, you're talking all at the same time. So this basically affects the attention control systems in our brain. especially you can see here, these regions have already been, I think you are familiar now by looking at these regions. These are the regions which are important, especially the attention network is overloaded with information. At the same time, there is an increase in this particular network called as the default mode network. Usually, we are, when we are at rest, when we're not actually focusing on any task, that is when we start reflecting. We start reflecting about something or the other. So, but when this system becomes hyperactive, it intrudes into the, even when you're doing something, this will keep intruding. So I will be focusing on that particular aspect in my next few slides. Yeah, so all this can lead to frustration and again, cognitive fatigue. You're not able to think properly. So apart from that, I would like to talk about rumination, as ma'am was also telling about this. It is one of the biggest challenges of negative emotions. And it can create a vicious cycle that can actually impair an individual's quality of life. So I would like to talk about this particular aspect, which we all do, that is self-reflection, which is a process of focusing on one's experiences, one's thoughts, and one's feeling. When this process becomes maladaptive, that is when it leads to rumination. So rumination basically is defined as a process of repetitive, prolonged, and recurrent thinking about oneself, about one's own feelings, especially with regards to negative emotions. When you keep thinking about what is happening to you, why am I feeling so bad? Why does this happen to me alone? We always think about this, right? Why does this happen to me? Why is it not happening to others? Why does it always, why is it I'm not being, um, it could be any one of those. It could be, why am I feeling so dumb or whatever it could be. It is always a process of repetitive thinking about one's own negative self, negative thoughts. So let me go into this in a little bit detail, because this has multiple negative consequences, such as it increases the risk for various mental health problems, like already the earlier speakers have been telling about this. So it can exacerbate, or it can increase the risk for developing anxiety, because you keep reflecting about your own self, your negative thoughts, you keep on ruminating. So it can lead to depression, it can lead to psychosis, or it can lead to sleep problems or post-traumatic stress disorders, or it could lead to impulsive behaviors. It could be any one of these. And negative thoughts, this especially the rumination, acts as an emotional magnifier, especially on the negative thoughts. Yeah. So it can lead to negative bias, especially with increased attention to negative information. You know, ruminate on negative information, you recall better about the negative stuff, or you interpret even a neutral situation, or it could be an ambiguous situation wherein you are in doubt, but you'll still interpret it as a negative thing. Or it could be delayed engagement from the negative content. You're not able to come out of it. Ma'am was saying you get stuck. You get stuck in that negative content itself. You're not able to come out of it. So it can make the mental health issues even worse, because it makes the negative emotions stronger and long lasting. It could interfere with problem solving, and so you won't get things done because you're still ruminating on it. And it can make it really hard to adapt to new situations, and it can amplify. Now the problem is, this negative thought and negative emotions, they can mutually amplify each other, and that is a very problematic situation, wherein it can trigger certain responses, especially the compensatory impulsive behaviors, where people will indulge in self-harm. This is called as the non-suicidal self-injury. They actually don't want to do anything bad to themselves, but they'll still cut themselves, or they'll do some kind of a harmful behavior. Or it could be binging on food. It could be binging on drugs. It could be alcohol, any kind of a binge situation. Apart from this, it definitely has plenty of health problems. Like I've already told you all these things. Of course, ma'am has dealt along with the sleep problems. It could be any one of these. So let me briefly explain about the rumination, mechanisms of rumination. It could be the environmental factors, such as having bad childhood, or it could be interpersonal stress, or it could be unhelpful parenting styles. Parents play a very important role in bringing up the children positively. There was a discussion earlier. Maybe we can have a discussion on this. And of course, it could be the biological factors which will cause this rumination. It could be uh, in this circuitry which is being there, maybe in certain regions, especially whenever there is high connections or high activity between the DMN regions itself, the default mode network itself. If this is more active, rumination can become worse. Or that is why they will not be able to suppress their self-referential thinking. And it could be between the attention networks and the DMN. So they're not able to focus on positive emotions. The focus is more on the negative emotions. Apart from that, yes, there can be a reduction in the regional gray matter volume, the brain volume itself in these particular regions, they shrink. So it could be the negative attentional bias that I was talking about earlier. And of course, impaired executive functioning, especially this particular region called as the frontoparietal network. It is the one which is important for shifting from irrelevant information to focusing on a particular relevant information. But when this system is impaired, you don't focus on the things that you need to focus, but you start going for the irrelevant information. That is especially dwelling on the negative thoughts excessively. And also, sir has told about this particular um, situation where the prefrontal cortex is the one which controls the amygdala, which is a center for negative emotions. When this circuitry is impaired, then this control over this region is not there, and therefore negative emotions can play havoc in a particular situation. So how do we come out of this vicious cycle? I will not go into too much details about each one of these. Especially there is ruminative focused CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which actually focuses on breaking of the habit of overthinking by identifying the cause of the trigger, or avoiding these triggers, or better way is to practice to respond to them. How do you respond to them when you have the trigger, or build a healthy, a positive way of looking at it? Of course, you can also have this cognitive bias modification. It may be the attentional bias, or it may be the interpretation bias. Cognitive, they train this individuals to modify their process of giving attention to the negative to positive side, or interpreting it in a different way. Also, we have the mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, which incorporates the meditational practice within the framework of CBT. And this especially helps the person to be more resilient, in the sense you bounce back from the negative situation. So that is really very important. And they actually make the participants to learn to maintain their attention to their breath, and to their thoughts and feelings, and to become aware of this, and take that in a non-judgmental way, accept it in a non-judgmental way. And that is why this is very important. They also help in developing the alternative responses to these negative thoughts and feelings so that you can come out of this habit. Apart from that, we have yoga, which helps the emotion regulation in both top down as well as bottom up. They integrate these things. And that is why this is very important, where you have the top down processes, which are basically your psychological processes, which actually help in the regulation of attention, or it may be the setting of intention. Like, for example, uh, or maybe decrease the psychological stress as well as the HPA axis. Now, I've already told you about the HPA axis in the sympathetic system. So yoga helps in down regulating these systems so that you don't have too much of cortisol or adrenaline to, break that havoc. So the bottom up processes by the breathing techniques. You focus on the breathing techniques and movement practices because you have the yogasanas. So these will take care of the other aspects, like, for example, the musculoskeletal, or it may be the cardiovascular, or it may be the nervous system, nervous function system, or the immune function, as well as the emotional well being. So, this way, the yoga stimulates the parasympathetic system, which is via the vagus nerve. And this is the one which helps us to keep our emotions as well as physical health in balance, because they have neurotransmitter systems which work on both the excitatory as well as inhibitory systems. So, with this, it helps us to promote the resilience, which in turn helps in overall well being is maintained by yoga. I would like to end my talk by quoting His Holiness. The way to overcome negative thoughts and destructive emotions is to develop opposing positive emotions that are stronger and more powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Suma Bhaskar, for that very interesting journey that you took us through into neurophysiology of emotions and the ways to handle them. Now we will go over to our next speaker, Venerable Geshe Loddo Sangpo, who was born in Tibet. Since 1992, he has been studying Buddhist philosophy at Ganden Monastery and was able to attain his Geshe degree in 2018. He has also studied a year of Tantric philosophy in 2019. Since 2000, he started learning science in 2006 and got to study at Emory University for 3 years. Presently, he is serving as the supervisor of Unit B Tukdam project and monastic coordinator of Science for Monks program at Emory Tibetan Science Initiative. Welcome, Venerable Geshe-la. We look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I just want to express my deepest gratitude to Geshe-la and all the organizers for providing this wonderful opportunity. And it is my privilege and honor to be part of this conference. To jump to the presentation, I have cited these two quotes from the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. The reason why did I quote these two stanza is because in the first stanza, for those who wish to find happiness and overcome misery will wander with no aim or no meaning if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the paramount significance of the Dharma. So basically, I think this first stanza clearly captures the essence, core value of the Buddhist teaching, as well as the purpose of the Buddhist teaching. And at the same time, it really gives us sense of direction in terms of searching in terms of where should we search happiness. And then the next stanza, this being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well, without the discipline of guiding the mind. What use are many other disciplines? So the next stanza conveys the point that if we just try to find a solution from different means, it could be kind of in searching happiness in the material value and living beside understanding of the nature of the mind and their mechanism and all these things that we have heard from this morning, then basically it will be a kind of useless. You see, find the right direction where we can find the solution is very important. And I think this morning presentation, particularly in the video kind of, the presenter talk about, someone just tried to do so much through, their surgical, outside surgery and Botox, and just try to get some kind of solution. Instead of finding solution, they ended up having some kind of disfigured sort of, ugliness in there. And therefore, it is very important to find the right, sort of source. And then I want you guys pay attention to the third line of the first stanza. If they do not comprehend the secret of the mind. So the question is, what is the secret of the mind? What is there in Buddhism that really reveals the secret of the mind? I think we have heard enough from this, from this morning presentation from the Geshe-la and other presenters. In Buddhism, it does not really talk about, typology of the, mental consciousness, but also it really make a distinction between what is the destructive emotion, what is the afflictive sort of, thoughts, and what are the constructive sort of, positive emotions. And on top of that, also it gives, the causal process where this, negative emotion originates. What are the causal process involved in that sort of, negative emotion? And not just giving the mechanism, but also it teaches how to really, regulate this emotion, how you really eliminate this negative emotion, and at the same time, how you can really enhance some sort of mental positive qualities. So I thought this is so through that way, we will be able to understand more sort of, depth of the consciousness, not just only from the grosser level, but at the same time, more sort of deeper level, subtle level, and all these things. Then the question, what is the mental illness? That is the big question for me. I mean, here I have also quoted one stanza, and that says, the chronic disease of self-centered attitude is the cause giving arise to my unsought suffering. Perceiving these, I seek your blessing to blame, begrudge, and destroy the monstrous demon of self-grasping. So here, the self-centered attitude is being called some kind of, chronic disease. And also, it is being called, referred, monstrous demon. So the question is, do the scientists agree this? Do the scientists claim the self-centered attitude as some sort of, mental illness? So I was just wondering about it, and in Buddhism, I think this morning, Lo Cheng spoke about the importance of the terminology, and when we do the translate Buddhist technical terms into English, then it loses kind of meaning. And in Buddhism, nyemu, I think roughly it is translated as kind of afflictive emotion. Actually, all this afflictive emotion does not has to be some kind of emotion. It also happens at the cognitive kind of level. It doesn't has to be some sort of feeling. And For example, Geshe Thapkela talk about the ignorance and all these things are kind of operating on the cognitive level. And then another one. Here, the practice of all Bodhisattva is to recognize delusion where whenever one is confronted by adversity or misfortune, for these suffering are just like the death of a child in a dream, and it is so exhausting to cling to delusory perception as real. So these also, I think, shades light on one kind of, afflictive, some sort of mental illness. You see, clinging delusory perception as the real. And I think these also operates only on the very kind of cognitive level, and this one has not much to do with emotion in respect to its essence or in respect to its nature, but it is the cause that really originates negative afflictive emotions, the emotion that. Then I was thinking about, will there be any kind of scientific evidence related to this kind of concept? And the closest one that I came to, I read the book by Richard Davidson, his books on the emotional life of your brain. And here it says that clinical depression is characterized by overactivity in specific region of the frontal cortex, the seat of reasoning, logic, analysis, and high thought, in particular region associated with anticipation, perhaps the cause of the endless rumination that grieves people suffering from depression. There is in addition. So basically, when someone goes through some sort of depression state, emotional state, and there is an overactivation at the prefrontal cortex, which is so much has to do with, I think, from the scientific perspective, has so much to do with kind of cognitive sort of overthinking. But is these so basically in here, the cognitive thinking or the distorted perception is being the driving force behind these afflictive emotions. And then I think here another one from the same book that states that when the middle prefrontal gyrus become active, the nucleus accumbens did too. And just as activity in the nucleus accumbens alone fell off in depressed patient, the connectivity between it and the middle prefrontal gyrus also diminished as the experiment went on. So basically, one of the common characteristics of the depressed patient is that, when they expose some sort of, stimuli that triggers positive emotion, they were not able to sustain that sort of, positive emotion, remain in that sort of, positive emotion state in comparison with the normal people. So basically, I think these also kind of, clarifies or kind of, aids another sort of, support claim for the cognitive thought or negative distorted thought being the cause behind it, because we know that there is so much activity going on in the frontal kind of, prefrontal cortex, but the positive triggers are not very much kind of, activating over there, because when the depressed people exposed to kind of, positive emotion, the link between what they call the, prefrontal gyrus and the nucleus accumbens is the kind of, part of the reward system where they can feel the pleasure and all these things. The connection kind of, diminishes or degenerates and not able to stay in that kind of longer period in comparison with the normal people. So basically, there is so much, some sort of negativity thoughts going on, and because of that, the emotional, some kind of depressive state arises from there. Then once the distorted thought, then I have this quote. This quote is actually the reason why I came up with this quote is that when distorted thought or kind of exaggerated thought induces some kind of afflictive, induces kind of emotional imbalance or emotional turbulence, then every people seems to have some sort of in a different sort of capacity in terms of handling this, distressing thought and giving response to it. And here it says that some, when they see their own blood, become easily brave and steady, but some, when they see the blood of other, faint and fall unconscious. So similar to this, I was looking what the scientific experiment might have done in relation to this kind of, context. Then I came to in the books called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcer. So in this book, it talks about stress-induced analgesia. So basically, what it really meant is that, when someone is in the battle fighting, I mean, in the army, soldiers, and when they get some kind of physical injury, and particularly, when they are in the process of a little bit kind of, winning, or a little bit sort of, excitement of winning over the kind of, the war, then contextual, I think, maybe interpretation plays important role in terms of handling this stress. Because here it states that, one of the first to document this phenomena of stress-induced analgesia was anesthesiologist Henry Beecher, who examined injured soldiers as battlefront medic in World War II and compared them with the civil population. He found that for injuries of similar severity, approximately 80% of the civil requested morphine, while only a third of the soldier did. So the soldiers have some kind of, bravery because of, I think, contextual sort of interpretation. And then related to this point, also another kind of, resources, some sort of scientific finding that, I have quoted here is the sensation processing part of cortex was activated to identical extent in both cases, but the more emotional part of the brain activated only in the case of pre-hypnosis. The pain was the same in both cases, the response to it was not. So basically, in this case, I think when the subjects were asked to put their hands into a very chill or very cold kind of, water, and then in two different conditions, one was with kind of hypnotic suggestion, and another one is not hypnotic suggestion, and the different reaction, not just kind of physiological reaction, but on the very kind of, structural reaction from the physiological part of the brain. What they did notice is that when before the hypnosis suggestion, there was the activations of emotional component, activation the brain that is responsible for generating some sort of emotion. But when the hypnotic kind of suggestion, the interpretation, the contextual interpretation, able to really subdue the emotional kind of arousal or something like that. So the point that what I'm trying to make here is you pointed that maybe emotion itself is not negative or positive. So here I think in this kind of here I also felt at one point maybe the mental illness, when it comes to speak about the mental illness, I think mental illness has so much to do with kind of cognitive thinking. And the emotion are other factors that fuels kind of, its intensity, that magnifies its intensity. For example, when we have some sort of destructive thought, when you associate with emotion, negative associate with emotion, the intensity of that destructive thought amplifies. And then through that way, it really beats us down. And similarly to the constructive thought, I feel when you intermingle this sort of constructive thought with a positive emotion, then the strength that come along with really speeds up, particularly for the spiritual practitioner, having a sense of conviction on the particular concepts such as interdependence. When you understand when you really analytically thinking about the interdependent nature of the reality, and at the same time associating it with sense of gratitude, I think that itself has some sort of extra sort of impact or effectiveness. in there. So emotion here, I'm referring in the context of scientific definition, emotion. In Buddhism, all the nyimung, all the clash are the kind of afflictive emotion, but I'm not sure whether this one really kept the kind of connotation really holds the whole meaning or not. So then once we are actually overwhelmed by this afflictive emotion, when we are in the full blown of this kind of afflictive emotion, then what really happens? So here we don't have much time, so I want to emphasize on the second line. It robes the mind of judgment to distinguish good from ill, or the right or wrong. And these days we talk about the emotional hijack. And emotional, when we are overwhelmed by these negative emotions, then it really hijacks our intellectual capacity. And then the result would be, in the worst case, I think maybe I just relate to this in our day-to-day life. When you watch kind of big games, maybe like cricket between Pakistan or India, and the Indian fans so much supporting to win the India, and when it is about to lose, and when if they lose, then they break the TVs down, they break the TV and everything. So much over, because of overwhelming of the emotion, and it really destroys or hijacks the or cognitive sort of uncapability. And here it also says that if when in the worst case, if when under the influence of disturbing conception or afflictive emotion, people will even kill their teacher self. And how can they be expected not to cause harm to the body of the other living beings? So as I said before, contextual interpretation play a very important role, because for example, when we encounter a child or kid saying some kind of harsh words, and then and that sort of harsh word, if told us by someone kind of adult, the reactivity to that two different sources will be completely different. And on top of that, when the drunk people say something, behave, or kind of negatively, then we will have a sense of a little bit forgiveness into that, because we think that he's intoxicated and drunk, and he loses his kind of capability of controlling his own emotion. And similarly, actually, when someone is very much overwhelmed by the negative emotion, their mental capability is hijacked, and they lose their control. And so we should apply the same logic, I would say. Then another sorry. So I just say, just talk on this point, and then I will leave. So then here one point: the know of the reality has said that even if recitation and physical hardships are practiced for a long period of time, they will be meaningless if the mind is distracted to elsewhere. So these days, we do see so much kind of, all the previous presenter talk about, our attention is pulled in many kind of in the different directions from different sources, and overloading kind of, technological sort of, usage. And because of that, our mind, the quality of our mind is very much deteriorating. And and so many attention deficit disorders in the teenagers, and it is increasing and increasing. And because of that, the challenge is really to moderate usage of these things and technology and all these things. And then I was wondering what would be neurological sort of damage happening when someone is going through attention deficit. So here I came up with this kind of finding from the books Emotion Life of Your Brain, when scientists at the University of Toronto recently measured neurosynchrony in 9 adults with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then 10 healthy control. They found much poor synchrony in the ADHD group. Again, one of the key neurocorrelates of selective attention is dysfunctional in ADHD. And then I think, science these days, scientists actually saying that when, of course, from the different, findings and mounted evidences, and people do have a different sort of, stress, responses, even though the same stressor is kind of, exposed. The reason behind that, these days they claim that each individual have some sort of different affective style, and these are the 6 leads that is presented in the book, The Emotional Life of Your Brain, having better resilience and all these things, and pretty much like these in Buddhist texts. I think this one's from the Sharaka level by the Asanga, also speaks about 7 different types of the personality, or personality, or the the traits of personality. And I think so. Yeah, I maybe leave it here. I have a few more to share, but time's limited. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe-la, for that very, very interesting presentation on emotions from a Buddhist perspective. I think the first 2 presentations offset several questions. One that was coming to my mind was, what is the relationship between the brain, the mind, the psyche, and life history? Yeah, because Geshe-la towards the end also spoke about context. No interpretation can be made acontextually. All interpretations are in the context of the life of the person that we are talking about. And maybe we will spend some time during discussion to think about what is mental illness in context of an individual's life. So, our next presenter for the afternoon is Dr. Sabrine Rizvi. We have already heard her in the morning, and we know that she's teaching at Gargi College. And she is presently researching on terrorism, youth radicalization, marginalization, and peace studies using intersectionality framework for her way to understand communities. She will be talking about um, 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 negative emotions for mental health in today's world from the perspective of Western psychology.
Good afternoon, all. Not carrying a presentation. I thought everybody would be sleepy by now after that lovely meal. All right. Very warm welcome. Very grateful to the Tibet House and all my co-panelists, the chair. Honored to be chaired by you, ma'am. And so happy to be here. And thankful to all my students who are here, like just as a team. So I start my talk with sharing a statistic that India, since 2016, when the UN started publishing the World Happiness Report, it has been in the lowest rung. 2016, we were in the lowest 12, then 17, we were still there, 18, still there, ... 23. Out of 136 nations, we are still at 136. Bangladesh, China, Sri Lanka, all of these nations are above us. So that means that we are in a state of misery. How many of you sitting in this room are unhappy? Yeah, that's like 10% of the room, right? Yes. Yes. I get the message. Yes. So I mean, given that consistency in the report of the UN publication, given by the fact the speaker in the morning was sharing that, also I would want to share that, we would be sharing few terms that are going to be triggering in nature. So anybody, if you feel uncomfortable during the talk, any word or term that I use, please do feel comfortable to leave the room. We were talking about suicide, we were talking about depression, we were talking about non-suicidal self-injury, self-harm, and we were also talking about how every 40 seconds we are losing a life. So having these 2 thoughts in your mind, I would say negative emotions are not the challenge that we are facing today. Now, I have my reasons for my argument. during the initial period when psychology started gaining grounds, we were starting to develop from a more deficit-based model, where we were looking at what are the things that we can do to fix people, fix communities, fix the problems, all of that. So mostly, by and large, we were looking at solutions to fix people. And then 3 decades back, we saw a cannot pronounce it. We saw an increase in literature in the area of positive psychology. And there we are now looking at findings of Csikszentmihalyi, who is talking about flow. We're looking at Martin Seligman. He's talking about flourishing. We're looking at Ed Diener. He's talking about happiness, uncoding, dehacking, how to be happy. Barbara Fredrickson, she's talking about how to cultivate a happy life, what to do in your life to have happier outcomes. During COVID, many of you must have enrolled for Laurie Santos's class on happiness, like leading a good life. And during the same period, COVID was the time when we were also reminded that what could be worse in our life. That was the time when we were told that, if we have lived through this time, chances are that future we will not have any problems that will not look like surmountable to us. If I ask each of you right now, you would have 20 unsolved problems that are waiting for you that you're going to deal with post you leave this room. So the problem is this, that negative emotions per se are not problematic at all. Negative emotions, on the other hand, if we look at the science of it, and if we look at what researchers have brought to the fore, they have their social value. They act as social cues. If I cry in front of you, most of you, I have reasons to believe you're talking about good intentions and goodness within us, would come to me and ask me. So it's a social cue. I'm in distress. I need help. You come to me and help me. It also has evolutionary value. It is helping us survive. So negative emotions per se, they are not problematic, is what I'm saying. Secondly, when we talk about the increase in the area of research, I'm not critiquing positive psychology. But all I'm saying that recently, just a couple of months back in 2023, metasynthesis was published that was looking at all of the findings of positive psychology, their methodology, and what is it that the philosophy is not doing right, because there was a lot of criticism about not having a very neat technique to measure positive emotions, not being able to actually measure positive emotions. So in that paper, the author and the colleagues, Chris Jansen, if I am not mistaken, they argue that the problem with positive psychology is this, that they are looking at psychology in a dichotomous way. So this is positive, this is negative. What is positive, we have to cultivate more in our life. What is negative, we have to run away from. But that kind of mindset, what it leads to is that we suddenly become very fearful of anything that is negative. So we cannot cry in public. We cannot express our distress in public. I cannot, at least in our culture, there is still permissibility to cry and express a degree of negative emotions in public. Certain other cultures, it's a mark of weakness. So what is happening there is this, that we are associating day by day that expression of negative emotions, they are a mark of character weakness. How does it translate to our own understanding? We start interpreting it in ways that, okay, if I express a negative emotion at a public space in front of people that I don't know, that means that I am a weak person. But that is not what the problem is. The challenge is this, that we are not able to integrate the negative emotion in our life. We are not able to accept it. The shift has also been seen if we look at the therapeutic approaches. Marsha Linehan, some of you must be aware, who is the founder of dialectical behavior therapy. She has written in her own autobiography that how her life has been all about a lot of suffering that she was not able to contain at all. She sought different ways of seeking help, psychiatry, psychology, therapy of different modalities. Nothing seemed to help. Then this, again, with the help of a therapist and her own inner work with herself, reflecting within, that she found that if I find a basis or acceptance for what my emotions are, it's easier for me to integrate that in my being. So that seems like the solution to look forward to, where we are not problematizing the negative emotion. We are not saying all the time when a kid, many of us must have seen this, that a kid falls and the first thing that comes to our mind is this, kuch nahi hua. When we say kuch nahi hua, what we are doing, we are invalidating the child's lived experience of that fall. We are telling him or them that this, whatever it is that has happened to you, it didn't happen. So what is the child learning and imbibing? That next time when this happens, either I don't report it, or if I do, then I have to not talk about it. So I think again, like I said, the challenge is not the negative emotion. The challenge is our non-acceptance towards the negative emotion. We have had many laboratory controlled studies that have shown that acceptance of negative emotion leads to better health outcomes also. One of the speakers before, they were talking about, I think, Dr. Svetlana from Serbia. They were talking about the toxic culture that social media is creating around us. So difficult to post without a filter, right? Everybody is so pretty looking, beautiful, and all that. Such nice places they visit, such nice pictures they post. What is it doing? A culture of false positivity and toxic positivity is being created around us. Everybody is happy around me. Why am I not happy? But everybody who's happy around you, they're just posting pictures. If they were truly happy, immersed in the moment, they probably didn't have the time to click pictures, right? When you're immersed in the moment, you wouldn't get the time. So again, the problem does not lie with the experience of negative emotions. Negative emotions are part and parcel of our psyche, who we are as people. Even from the Western psychology point of view, the shifts that we are seeing the success of dialectical behavior therapy in the area of a lot of personality disorders that previously we believed that, these are absolutely uncurable. There is no help available for such disorders. CBT is now mindfulness based. We have acceptance and commitment therapy. All of these therapeutic orientations and the new trends in the field, they're leading us to believe that the challenge does not lie in the negative emotion. The challenge lies in the cognitions that we build around the negative emotions, how we are interpreting the emotion. What value am I adding to that emotion? Everybody feels angry. If you meet with somebody who says that I do not feel angry at all, you have just met with God. Congratulate yourself. Everybody feels angry. Everybody feels sad. You'll feel miserable. There would be times in your life where you'd feel that, I do not know my way forward. But that's an experience. And I agree what our chair was sharing before, that negative or positive, it is just an emotion. You are judging the emotion and you are labeling it as negative or a positive emotion. So the problem lies with the judgment. It does not lie with the kind of emotion we are dealing with. The sooner we understand and imbibe this argument within ourselves, that my negative emotions are not a problem. The problem is this, that might be the narrative that I'm following, the toxic positivity culture, the social media feed that I am looking at, that is making me believe that it's not okay to feel sad. It's not okay to feel a little low. It's not okay to feel less enthusiastic about something that everybody is feeling so enthusiastic about. So I think we need a shift in narrative. The deliberations now have to be towards how do we create greater acceptance? And I think Tibet House is doing a great job for that. All the mindfulness training, and Enhance as well. All my colleagues are doing fantastic work in terms of scientific literature that they are producing and showing us that, yes, it makes a difference to your brain. Look at the scans. These are the results. You do it for 21 days. James Clear, Atomic Habits. Do it for these many days. It's going to make a difference. But it's only going to make a difference. Positive emotions, whatever it is that we are going to cultivate, we are going to imbibe in our life, they're only going to stay and they're only going to be long lasting when we also have the capacity to embrace our negative emotions. When we also have a capacity to say to ourselves that, yes, I feel sad. Let me pause and see and understand why. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rizvi, for that very stimulating talk. I think that's really the crux of the matter, being able to bear your emotions. Often I feel that when there's a death in a family and there's a child, parents are sending the child away. It comes to my mind, who cannot bear the sadness? Is it the child or is it the parents? Why not have a age developmental way in which we introduce children to reality, gradually to the reality of life, which will continue to present itself many, many times over to us. So, as Dr. Rizvi said, the problem is not of, well, I would still not call them negative emotions, but quote unquote negative emotions. The problem is our propensity to deny or to dissociate or to run away from feelings. And that, I think, meditation, psychotherapy, hundreds of ways in India and the East, especially, are of self reflection. I think we could, according to our own temperament, adopt some of them to enlarge the purview. I really liked her term that she said, embracing the emotion. The point is about embracing the emotion. And I will move to Mr. Vinod R., who is a teacher at the School of Human Studies. He's my colleague there, who teaches psychology and education both at the undergraduate and the postgraduate levels at Ambedkar University, Delhi. He teaches many courses which are very interesting. I would just list a couple of them: experiencing the self, listening, communicating, and relating, understanding childhood, childhood identity and society, experiencing education, immersed pedagogies, psychosocial experiences. The point is that he's a very unique teacher with a pedagogy that really touches, and education that touches the student. I think that is the education that we really remember in life, not the concepts like Maya Angelou said. Vinod is a living example of that. She said, people will never remember what you said. People will remember how you made them feel. Vinod is a teacher who makes students feel. And it is my good fortune that the panel on this side have both been my students at some point of time. And he has the ambition of becoming a barefoot psychologist, working with groups with the vision of free clinics. Welcome, Vinod.
Thank you. I would like to just sit as I just go through my thoughts. I would like to thank Mr. Kunga Chodan and Miss Tenzing Doma. They were the ones to come to the university to invite, and I had an hour of discussion to really, and I was trying to really convince them that a therapist who is working in the university should be at the podium because she's receiving so many aspects of life and struggle, and she's struggling, and she's a very good therapist. She should be on the panel. And we were just trying to talk about the challenges of the whole conversation between what is life in the university and what has university got to learn, and what happens when university and professionals in the university actually begin to reflect on the university life itself more openly and more honestly, as opposed to the current frame of trying to be politically correct in all different perspectives. Yeah, so thank you, uh, and Venerable Gishe Dorji Tamdul. uh, I heard that you were very open and receptive. So through your students, I came to know you as a being, and I thought that maybe the space that you would invite will have some people with whom I could connect to share my grief and reflection. So I'm more here to see if there can be some connection made to some teacher who is also struggling in a very invisible way, very well knowing that the best things in life cannot be taught. And thanks for the panel, with that I'm symbolically a part of. So I'd like to just pick that up before I come to share anything from my end. One is from Suma Bhaskar about ruminations. Yeah, I mean, my whole paper is ruminations. So I wonder where I stand. But the one idea that you mentioned about is the ruminations part of childhood and sexual abuse or autobiography? Is people who ruminate and reflect about one's work, are they trying to rescue some broken parts in their own self? Is something that I would like to say that yes, we do as we ruminate. So ruminations have their own value, yeah, and to Venerable Geshe Lode Sangpo. I'm not very good with names, so please be okay with my slowness and my imperfect pronunciation. Especially when you mentioned why zebras don't get ulcer, that particular book. Yeah, thanks. Why zebras don't get ulcer. And you made this poignant line when you said that when they see their own blood, some become especially brave and steady, right? So through my paper, it's mostly about not just challenges of classroom and listening to breakdowns of students, but it's also about listening to one's own tears and what one will never be able to understand, or what the structure will never give a space to probably acknowledge. Because if they would acknowledge, then the structure will lose its linearity and success. The structure will lose its charm, you know, because it is in the invisible. So it is in that morning that I would like to begin my conversation with. And to the last speaker, Sabine Rizvi, when she said, we cannot cry in public and we can't express negative emotions. I always cried in public in many of my paper presentations. And I carry the grief of a lot of my students and me very easily, because I think for me that's more saner than not crying. Yeah, so this is what I carry. So it's like a spiritual space to be in among all these people to say. So maybe today I may not cry because I've been able to laugh, and you've been able to laugh on my behalf on this. Yeah, and through all the flowers and all this, that's like, yeah. And to a teacher who introduce me the way that, it's too overwhelming to handle at the moment. Yeah, so I'm just going to read and see if you can bear with me for some time to listen to these ruminations. So what is the life of a teacher in a university? What are the travails, challenges, and expectations of life at home and university? How do we make sense of his or her everyday images of being a caretaker, parent, working towards research and classroom struggles, losses of life, and motivations of identity and intimacy in being a teacher? Because we are always receiving, student struggles, and we are trying to provide a structure where there is no structure. We are trying to provide hope where we are not able to gather hope. It's not that we are really coming from some bright space where we are able to receive so much of breakdown, so much of struggle, so much of ambition, so much of wanting to go to places, and we are not able to provide it in such a linear way, because we feel that there's a lot of there's a lot of invisible struggle that goes up in setting up of the space. So the question that I really want to ask is, how do we make sense of the teacher's psychobiography or psychohistory to understand the individual in the social, and trying to situate the journey of teaching, relating, and caring between family life journey and university life? Yeah. What is the experience of faculty members in the group? What is his sense of belonging? So my focus on negative emotions is not about the social other. My focus of emotion is on the working other, with whom we work, with whom we struggle, who are our colleagues. What happens to our colleagues when they leave the university? What happens when we have in-group and out-group? What happens to the power dynamics in the university? And how can we reflect on that? I don't want to reflect on, what is happening with the students, but what is happening within us as professionals. And from there, we'd like to see what is the strength of the negative, or what is the power of the negative in exploring that. So how does teaching learning, um, so what are the struggles, challenges, and failures and successes that one negotiates in the classroom? So how does the teaching learning shape these experiences of teachers being in the classroom? Does the ideal he or she trying to transform and the society shape up from the experiences of his autobiography? Am I actually mourning when I'm actually saying I want to transform the world? Is there a link between my broken parts and the parts that I want to learn to assemble to be a beautiful space? So these are the kind of questions that I would like to stay with. This became pretty explicit during the pandemic, so the question is that what do you teach? So what do you teach during pandemic, when there is death and hopelessness all over? So in retrospective, narrative of surviving the COVID-19 pandemic, the online classes, this phenomenology of online education and its relationship to teaching basically challenges all idea of space, all ideas of identities of being a teacher, and this whole idea of efficient delivery of content without bodies, without human bodies. Yeah. So the ritual of normalcy that we all performed for 2.5 years, believing that we were able to teach and you were able to learn, really conceals the real sense of emptiness and voids and vicissitudes of the self that we need to really reflect to make sense of. So the themes of this language of experience actually reflects about static dynamism, which means on paper everything is perfect, but from within that static okayness is really not okay. And we are actually struggling and grappling with so many imperfect parts for which we had a space where we could come and talk about it. So for me, this space on negative emotion, on grief or mourning becomes that real space where we can breathe to say, this is what I've been trying to share, despite all the other things being said that we are doing well. I'm not saying we are not doing well. I'm not saying we are not doing it, but I'm trying to really hope that we are able to pause on what we are also not able to do and speak about it freely so that we are able to build a community of practitioners to really get closer to that authentic self. Yeah. So what can be taught when there is epidemic and death and collapse of the community in the name of the virtual? What is memorable in the experience of teaching and feedback without bodies being present? Can the truth be told of narcissism and self centeredness in relationship, or the poverty of content in objective question and answers? You set up questions in which teachers, students do the objective answering. You set up questions in examinations where you used to look at their writing and then call people. All changed. A lot of things changed. Yeah. So, uh, so then what is happening through these endless hours of time we spend on feedback, despite knowing that this climate and this regime has the potential uh, to reduce us as teachers to become a non-being. Yeah, because you have efficient machines and machines can teach. So why do you need a teacher figuratively even to teach with the AI enthused curriculum and syllabus and everything coming to play? Yeah. So it is in this backdrop of agency, potential collapse and humility. I would like to have conversation around this myth of knowingness and certainty as I sit in this table to make some conversation about. Therefore, I would like to listen to the fellow teachers about their conversations about dialogue, care and compassion during the pandemic. What was those moments where they felt that they could actually reach out to their students, despite the fact that they were crying, they were afraid, they were mourning, but yet they presented a strong structure of, because you had to hold for the others to, let the whole thing on to them. So I believe it is in these ruminations of mourning that there is a slight potential to breathe the worlds and the words we slowly want to dream as we dread its collapse. Um, Now, our university set up since 2010, and we built this university with a vision of Ambedkar, and a lot of schools trying to really work to set up their visions. Yeah, and slowly over a period of time, you see so many exits from the group, and and then we also see the anger and rage in the part of the group. We see that there are in groups and out groups that are really working and battling to work around the issue of power. Yeah. So the question there is, this only oasis that I see in my university is this free clinic called Ehsas, which Hani and all colleagues put together to work for students to come free of cost to clinic. It's a free clinic where poor people could walk into the university to just share, and there are our psychology students and MPhil students and teachers would listen to them, and we have something to learn from that idea of free clinic. Yeah, and what does it mean to sort of work with them? So that's the only space there. There I see that we are able to recover our depleting phase despite all the struggles that we face in terms of survival. So another question for me is, how do we now invest in slowness to work to sustain the thought? It's not the speed, it's not efficiency, it's not meeting all the milestones, but how do we reflect on our work slowly, and how do we focus on our pause? And when can we actually say what we feel? And when do I singularly feel that we are the words we speak? Yeah. So if in this group or in this space, if we have that conviction that we are able to do that freely, I feel good to be a part of this panel to make sense of what is emotions, what is that authenticity, and what am I trying to reach in the other or for the other. So it is this so so again, everywhere, university, the state, everywhere, it is the pragmatic again winning over those ideal. Yeah, where many are separating and bickering apart. Can there be a retreat to recover? Can we cry together, or should we always break down in silence? Does psychoanalysis understand this symptom of departures and abandon? Do we recognize the moment of tears? Is there a hope to heal the authority within and outside as we negotiate faculty spaces and relationship? So this is the question. Is there hope? Is there any hope to heal the authority in a conversation of equal on on a table where you can say, this is where I struggle and grapple with despite all your good intentions? And can some of that happen so that some real healing is possible? So it is this ambivalence. It is this ambivalence that is the root cause of lack of authenticity, latent envy, and disappointments in all of us. That, we are not authentic and we are envious, or that we are always ranting all the time कि ये सही नहीं है, वो सही नहीं है, दुनिया ही सही नहीं है, और मैं भी सही नहीं हूँ. So the question is, why is that space of ranting continuous despite we delivering what we are supposed to be delivering as professionals? So there is some space somewhere where the truth is completely different from what is what we are living, right? So it is this simmering that I would need help to sustain. It is that simmering thought that I need some help to sustain. And if there is no vision to hold on, are we even a community that with the academic freedom so lost that it is always performing conformity as opposed to spontaneity? Always confirming, always trying to be good, always trying to be that there's no space for that difficult voice to emerge. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I have much time do I have. so, so okay, so it is this. I conclude. So, so there are certain explorations around myself as a teacher: absence of love, abandonment, struggles with roots of identity and becoming, and these erasures, this fear around my past that provided always a sense of poverty, which I thought psychoanalysis provided strength and some articulation around this shame and humiliation and acceptance of failure. It is this poverty of myself, to not able to give a real face to my experience, and a sense of masking my identity, that I grapple to negotiate the system that seeks to earn for an authentic self. I would like to listen to the journey of fellow academics and faculty around this theme of mourning resilience and vision of social transformation in higher education institutions not only at an individual level, but also at a group level through the sense of institutional building and commitment. To end, the challenges to negative emotions for mental health as emergent from challenges in professional self and the institutional setting, and in learning to listen to the delicate challenges of the vulnerable self, we care to relate to all beings and lessons that the pandemic made us humane in our struggle to be humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod, for taking us closer to your journey in the context of the university. I'm told by the organizers that we won't be able to go into the question and answers or a discussion session because we have two sessions which are still, to be completed. And to do justice to them, perhaps we will need to close this one. As a closing remark, I would like to say that it was really a huge breadth we covered in this session, from neuroscientific perspectives and physiology of the brain to Buddhist philosophy to psychology as a discipline, Western or otherwise, and university as a caretaker of futures to imagine. I would also like to end by saying that Sigmund Freud, who's understood to be the father of modern day psychology, started in 1895 with a project which he called a study for scientific psychology. And he believed that he will be able to find the neurophysiological basis of unconscious emotions. Yeah, we have hardly spoken about the unconscious in this room. We are more at the level of cognitive experience, but there are many things which guide our life unknown to ourselves, and that is the power of the unconscious. Freud abandoned that project 20 years later on because he realized that there was no one to one correspondence between neurophysiology and the emotive self. Today, more than a century later, we are again trying to reach back to the roots of emotions via the neurophysiological angle, which is important. But I have always felt that we don't always have to go towards evidence. Buddhism is a great tradition in itself. Buddhist meditation changes us, transforms us. We don't need a physiological basis always to authenticate it. I do believe that there are other routes to studying human emotions, which are how do people relate to one another after meditation? What is the change in our interpersonal world? How do our dreams change? From dreams of violence, I had a Buddhist practitioner friend who said, at least now, after 20 years of meditation, I'm more compassionate to the dogs in the dreams. Yeah, I think that is a great evidence of change that comes up as well. So, while on the one hand, we should work with science, on the other hand, I do believe that we can also see the effects of traditions of compassion, be it meditation, Buddhism, yoga, even psychotherapy, also in the everyday effects of our life. And that is evidence enough too. Thank you very much for bearing with all of us and for the wonderful speakers. Each one brought out very, very distinctive shades of their lived experiences for our collective understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chair and speakers, for emphasizing on a profound topic, challenges of negative emotions in mental health, especially in today's world, from your respective perspectives. And it was extremely wonderful to hear from you all. And I apologize to our audience because we were not able to do the Q&A session. I think the time is not in our favor. Yeah. Okay. Now I would like to request Mr. Ajur ji, retired IAS officer, Government of India, to present the souvenirs and our traditional Tibetan scarf to our chair and respective speakers. So our chair, Dr. Hani Oberoi ji. Okay. Okay. Miss Suma Bhaskarji. Venerable Lori Sampula. Dr. Sabin Rizviji. Okay. And Mr. Vinod RG. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.